This call is now being recorded. This call is now being transcribed.
Okay, so welcome everyone to our weekly Fluential Learn webinar. Today, the topic I'm covering is going to be a series of different webinars on this topic, and it's one of those that I get questions asked every time we do a Kaizen initiative or Kaizen Improvement Initiative. Kaizen is a term which is very popular within lean and continuous improvement, but they mean different things based on what you're talking about. There's a Kaizen methodology, there's a Kaizen initiative, Kaizen blitz, or Kaizen full-week event, and there's the Kaizen, the approach of actually taking a problem from the beginning to the end. So I'll try to cover all of them in different webinars in this series. Today, the topic I'm trying to cover is how to prepare for an improvement event. So my focus will stay there, but I will try to bring in or explain the context about different terms as required. So what I'm going to try to cover today, really quickly, what is Kaizen Improvement Event, and then everything about what you're required to do, the prep, which has all those components and elements. We'll go through them one by one, so I'll read them here. And then we'll cover, end it with the summary and link to the next webinar, which will be part of the series. Okay, so what is the Kaizen event? The term Kaizen is a Japanese term, and it has two syllables, as you can see there, Kai and Zen. When you translate them, they mean change and goodness. They really have the term in English could be translated into two different phrases. One is change for good, and then change for better. Change for better really means that you want to go to a better state than where you are right now. So if you see that the letter on the other end, each step is a step towards doing something better than where you are. And change for good means is whenever you take that step, I'm going to go backwards. So you want to change for good. And you do that by having a plan to check out cycle or some kind of standard control system. And we'll look at different ways of doing that and different tools that are there throughout this series on Kaizens. A Kaizen event looks into usually a multiple day event. It depends on the scope. It could be a blitz, which is done quickly, or it could be as big as a week-long event, but they have usually these four main steps during the event itself. So there's the covering of why we're in the event by usually the process sponsor and the people who are in charge of the problem. Reviewing of the charter, reviewing of any data or observations that we have. So the team which is got together to solve that problem understands why we're there and get the context in place. In parallel, if you see the yellow arrow at the bottom, there is some education that is delivered throughout the event to the team, especially if the team does not know some of the skills or some of the approach or methodology of what Kaizen is or Lean is or whatever tool you may end up using. So there are some examples of the tools there, like identification of waste, plan to check act I talked about, standards. What do you really mean in this term of Kaizen standards? Are the same as standards in mining or standards in like SOPs? It's a little bit different. So you're trying to understand, give that knowledge to the team. And then how do you problem solve? How do you make sure we don't go backwards? How do you put some controls in place? All that good stuff is usually provided during the Kaizen event. And in the prep stage, where it will become important is as you're going through understanding what the problem you're trying to solve or what team you're going to have, what kind of issues you may be dealing with, you decide, whoever is facilitating, and the team is just part of in charge of solving the problem on the lean expertise side, decides what modules need to be taught to the team. And then the three steps usually are you try to identify where the inefficiencies are, the waste is being the lean wastes, understand where we're losing the value at a time, and then maybe doing some problem solving, either brainstorming or fishbones or five whys. A lot of different techniques you can use to understand where the problems are, what are the root causes. Then you go to the as-is process of how do we do things today, identify the opportunities, and then the last step is to say, how can we make it better? So what is the new work design or to-be process? In middle, as you see, there's a box on top that says test and implement, or in some people call it try storm. Really, the understanding is as you're moving from the as-is process or existing process, new process, if you have the ability to try it, you try it during the event. So this allows you to come up with an idea, try it, and then implement it if you can within the same time period. If it's a week-long event, you may have some time to test some ideas. And the rest then goes outside the event, which will be another series in this Kaizen series and another webinar where we'll talk about what to do post the event. Really, the idea is you get together, try to solve a problem, and you go to that to making things better, right? And do it within the Kaizen event. So this is just to give you an idea of what Kaizen event I'm talking about. And when we're saying preparing for Kaizen, it's before this event, what we're trying to do. These tools we'll cover in a different webinar, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what the tools exist that gets commonly used in a Kaizen event. So day in life study is something you will do in the prepare stage. So we'll talk about that a little bit going forward. Then on the middle, you have the waste or 7 wastes. So this is the lean terminology of identifying where the inefficiencies are, where we're losing value or value at a time. Then you have the work redesign on the left bottom. It's really different ways of controls you can have in place to make sure that you're following through to make things better, or adding more value at a time, maybe removing some non-value at a time, which non-value at a time, but necessary impact by either eliminating it or combining it with some other activity and gaining more value at a time this way. On the right-hand side, top is about using a task assignment approach, or CPT-QRT is another term that people know about, really to figure out if you're going to do new things or new tasks that have to be done, who's going to do them, and one time, what kind of quality and quantity is needed. Why it's important to use that in this approach is big, to make sure that you're not taking too much new things without giving a thought to who's going to do it and what is more important, right? So out of the 4 things, quality, quantity, resource, and time, what is the most important for what we're about to do to make things better? And then everything else could be a compromise, or we can figure out how we can get to that objective we're trying to do by focusing on the right factor out of the 4. And then the very right on the mistake proofing side, that's the philosophy, also known as Pokoyoke in Lean. Really, the idea here is to figure out how can we have the new process or new control, which, if possible, eliminates from the error from happening. So that's be a mistake proofing action or mistake proofing process. But if you cannot do it, can we do something with the main action or the detection of the occurrence, or the likelihood of occurrence from it occurring, or at least something on detecting when the error has happened or when the problem has occurred. So those are different levels of mistake proofing or controls in place, and you want to obviously aim for the mistake proofing as one of them. Just wanted to give you an overview. We will cover these in a different webinar on the Kaizen. Okay, let's get to the Kaizen event prep. So the first thing is about what problem are we trying to solve and what are the objectives. So I'm sure you guys have gone through defining a problem statement and what should be part of objective statement or not part of objective statement. So we won't cover too much time discussing those, but I'll give you very high level things that should be in your mind when you're trying to do this. So for problem statement, we're going to make sure we're identifying who's the customer, who's calling you to solve this problem, because those are the people who are going to help you open the doors, who are going to help you select the team, who are going to be giving you the backup when you hit the cutoffs, right? What's the impact of the problem on the customer? Make sure you quantify it. The term there, who feels the pain, how significant is the pain, is really trying to say how big the problem is that we're about to solve. So the idea is eventually when you're going into Kaizen event, you need to make sure that you pick the right problem and not a symptom. Objective statement: what is the purpose of the project? This is very common in project management. Start with the verb to describe the purpose. For example, eliminate, reduce, increase, improve. Avoid using multiple verbs, because usually what that means is you have two different objectives. Not to say you cannot have that, but then you just have to make sure that the Kaizen is not chewing on too many problems in one go. You may want to have a series of different Kaizen events. Scope of improvement: agree on initial scope of Kaizen improvement boundaries before collection of the data. Really what it says, draw an imaginary box, make sure you understand what's inside that box, what's outside that box. If you can identify that up front, then you know during the event if there is a solution which is trying to do something outside the box and it's still a good solution, maybe you're going to put it in a parking lot and come back to it in a different Kaizen event, or a different team maybe is better suited for solving that problem. Or maybe it's not part of the scope at all, so you can have a discussion and move on, and you don't need to focus it on this Kaizen event. That will help you to be ready for that during the Kaizen event. Performance indicators. So there's three things here which are important to identify up front. One is what are my leading and lagging indicators of what I'm trying to improve out of the Kaizen. So leading are things which we expect to have a direct impact out of the Kaizen event. If you come up with a new process, it should improve a few things right away. And then lag indicators are most likely the indicators which your objective statement or your problem statement is connected to. Obviously, it would be great if you had direct impact on those, but the way usually things work in an operation or an asset, there's a lot of different variables which are connected to what you're trying to improve upon, and you may not be able to take everything in one Kaizen scope. So you pick out of your data analysis, which we'll get to in a second, what are the most critical variables that will impact my problem, and that becomes the scope of this event. And then the idea is that at least I should have some KPIs which measure to that part of the scope, which will be your leading KPIs, and then lagging KPIs hopefully are things which will improve over time by improving those leading ones. So I gave some example here on tons and value-added hours. In the mining world, for sure, this makes sense. Tons are usually what you're trying to improve, or if it was costs what you're trying to reduce. But let's say your scope of the Kaizen event is about improving value-added hours in a certain area, maybe drilling, maybe mucking, maybe hoisting, maybe milling, whatever it might be. And the idea is that that's my most critical variable that I believe will impact the tons. So that's going to be leading and lagging KPI. The other thing which most people miss, but I like to have the part of the discussion in the prep stage, is the vulnerable KPI or negative indicator. Really is to say, can you identify things which could be negatively impacted by us changing to a new process, to a new improvement process. So safety incidents could be a good example of it. Like me getting more value-added hours should not come on the expense of making things unsafe. In the milling world, there's a very famous one where you're trying to improve recovery should not come in the expense of the con grade, because that's in terms it's not really a real improvement. So there's a lot of examples in different cases or different industries. But if you think about that up front, the idea is that we know where we have to keep focus on. If the discussion goes towards something which is going to impact negatively on these indicators, we don't want to be changing our process without having some kind of control over it. Okay, let's get to the data collection plan. So this is one of the most important part in the prepare stage. And I believe every time I've been part of a Kaizen event execution without being part of the prep, and if it does fail, it fails because we didn't do this part properly. So there's three different ways you can collect the data: historical, interviews, and direct observations. Historical data, I think everybody understands. It's really looking at the data you already collect. And if you can find the data directly connected to your initial scope of improvement, if you measure kind of metrics or KPIs, like leading KPIs or whatever we just discussed, if they're linked to directly to your initial improvement scope, then that's great. Then you can analyze it. You can understand, is this a consistency issue? Is this a capability issue? Do I need to increase my capacity, or do I need to make better standards? Whatever it might be. But if you don't have that, you analyze the data you have. Like maybe you'll have some lagging data, and it will point towards what kind of problem you have. The other thing you want to understand, if you do collect, is the value at a time, or non-value at a time, and waste time. So what that means is, if I have a process, when does that process actually start doing what I'm asking it to do? How much of the time is about setup? How much of the time is completely waste time, where I'm waiting for something, or it's just things have gone wrong? If you have that breakdown, some machines collect that in the telemetry. Some processes also have that in as part of their system, like dispatching system or a operating system. It may capture those events. So if you have it, then analyze those. If you don't, then that's where we're going to go to some direct observations to get an idea of it. Another way to look at the data would be OEE, or overall equipment efficiency. If you have that in your organization, that's great. That usually will tell you where the losses are in the form of your availability, utilization, quantity, and quality. And that also points you towards the right direction of as to what the scope should be, what the problem, the focus of the problem should be. And finally, if you have the SPC, or statistical process control, in your organization, that is usually sitting on your leading indicators, and that will at least not only identify the right KPI, but also will give you the kind of an idea on, is it a stability issue or capability issue. So the difference is, stability is really about, am I consistently performing the same way? Is there special events happening which are causing disruption in my process? And then capability is all about, am I hitting the targets? Am I able to consistently be on where I'm supposed to be on the plan? Interviews, why they're important. Really, the data, if you're collecting the data, or even if you did direct observation, you're not going to be able to see all the possible performance issues, right? So this is where you talk to your process experts, your technicians, your maintenance people, your metallurgists, your even your management in some cases, who may understand that better than just what you can see from the data. Really, the idea is things which are not visible through the data, but you may get a context as to what that data is trying to tell you. So those conversations usually are good. You should include people from all levels. And then as you start defining the scope and tightening the scope, then you may talk to more one type than the other. And in the beginning, you want to probably get all the information to the right people and say, what you need to tell me about this. The other thing you can do here in this stage, even though it has nothing to do with data collection, is to keep a log of people that you talk to, because depending on what scope you pick, this is where you're going to figure out who should be part of your Kaizen event when you go to do the improvement. Very important to select people who are genuinely interested in solving this problem, or people who are frustrated by that problem, because they will be the one who usually know the solution. And then come and help you articulate the new way of doing it. And it also helps with the change management, right? So the biggest thing that Kaizen improvement tries to do is go from a way to our way of doing things. So team comes together and come up with a new process, which is their process. So then they're your loudspeakers of the change management when you go disband and try to implement it through the organization. The final way of collecting data is direct observation. The reason you will do this, and reason this happens usually for all Kaizens, is we don't measure everything in our organization. We don't measure leading KPIs as well as we do lagging KPIs. And so if you don't have leading KPIs, it's better for you to get some kind of understanding, maybe a few shifts of the observations, maybe a week of observation, depending on how good your tight your scope is, of looking at each process and at least trying to figure out where's the value added time in that process, and what are kind of activities you have under non-value added or waste, which are constraining your value. And this will then also serve as your baseline for your Kaizen, right? So when you went from a previous way to a better way, eventually in your post Kaizen event process, you would like to validate that the Kaizen did make the changes. So this could be your baseline, and then you repeat these same observations to see if things have improved. The other thing that I would like to connect here is there is a way to also understand if there is a disconnect between what's happening versus what people believe or the organization believes is happening. This could happen over time when a lot of firefighting happen in the processes, and people start focusing on those more than the root causes, and you get your blinders on. So this process usually will help you identify through doing an exercise called observe versus think versus wish, where you say, okay, what you believe your time is being consumed in, what you wish your time was consumed in, versus what you observe. And when you compare the three, it shows you some interesting conclusions if there's a gap between three, or which two are not aligned. Okay, next part is in preparation is the selecting the Kaizen improvement team. So we talked a little bit about, through your interview process, through your observation process, you may identify people who are good for your Kaizen event. So it's good to select them or keep a log of them and then select them from there based on the scope you picked. Ideally, you're looking at 7 to 10 people in per Kaizen event. Not to say you can have bigger teams, you can, but then usually it means that they have a bigger scope, and I'm going to have multiple facilitation sessions in parallel. So you just have to get ready for it and prepare for it a bit more. 70% of this should come from the team who are directly involved with the day-to-day activities that your Kaizen scope is about. Obviously, you need a lean focal, which will provide the education on how to problem solve, what are the wastes, why it's important to identify those wastes, how do you do process mapping, how do you do mistake proofing, all that good stuff. Somebody who can lead and co-lead, depending on how many people you have. It's good to have 2 people at least, which help you go through the whole process of preparing, so they understand how do you select the problem, what the observations were, and then when they're presenting it to the team is doing the problem solving, they're able to answer those questions. When somebody says, it could be because of this or this, and they said, oh, no, what we saw that was this, right? So it's good to have those facilitators. More people you have in the team in the Kaizen event, like if you go beyond 10, because you have a lot of people who are part of the problem, then you want to have multiple co-leads. Team members use the process on it. They provide the process knowledge. Very important. Without them, there will be no Kaizen. And then management also needs to be involved, in making sure the right people are available to do this event. It's not a 1 or 2 hour thing. Usually, you're going to be there for the week or for a few days if it's quicker Kaizen. And then during that Kaizen event, the idea is the management is plugging in at the end and the beginning of the day to come and help us remove any barriers or what any solutions which are doable or not doable. So you're not waiting till the end of the event to find out if something was discussed, which is not possible because management level had more information that the operational level did not have, for example. Finally, you want to lock in the scope. So we started with the problem, we started with objective, we thought we knew a scope, then you collected the data, you interviewed the process, interview people, you analyze the data, and then you're selecting the team. Finally, you go back to people who called you in to do the Kaizen event or to the problem solver, and then present all what you have so far. Really, it's a charter that you've created, and you're getting a sign off on that charter. So it's now is the last time to finalize it, to make sure that your KPIs are aligned to how you're going to measure it, and then make sure your objective follows that SMART methodology, and then lock it in. Finally, you're going to schedule the event. In scheduling the event, it's important whoever is leading it to go through these things up front, because if you don't do them, the event will not be running smoothly. So you want to have a kickoff and a final report out planned. You want to have daily touch point planned with the leadership. And then you as an event, really, we got to make sure all team members are there. They're not going to be going in and out because you're going to otherwise not get the right problem solving, the right focus in there. Identify a venue room where this will be done. I always kind of pitch that if you're doing this in an asset, do not do it in the same office or same building, because then it's very easy for somebody to just jump out and leave and go back to work. Somebody will call them out. If you can go to a different, like if you're in a mill, maybe go to a mine conference room. If you're in a mine, go to mill conference room. If you're in a factory, maybe you go to the nearest hotel. Or we've also done like booked a conference room across the city, and then people have joined there to avoid that problem. Make sure the venue room has all the things you need: projection, audio, flip charts, whiteboard. It's common sense, but good for you to go and make sure it's there so you don't run into huddle when you're actually doing the Kaizen event. Procure any supplies that you need. Make sure there's enough snacks and foods there. Getting people stay on focus and actually listen and talk in the right mood. The foods and snacks really help. Finally, you're going to communicate and kick off. This is important that everybody knows why we're doing this, who's going to be part of it. You're trying to build that change management now. And especially if you're going on a site, you may want to think about some orientations you're going to happen, some logistic part, booking the camps, whatever it might be. All that has to be thought through and then communicated. That's the end of the prep stage. I'm right on time there. And our A&I approach, I think we covered most of the stuff. It's one of the most commonly used tools about stability issues. It's a lot of people-related issues, so it's good to bring those people in and work together. And the prep goes a long way to make sure that happens. Yeah, and the last thing I would is make sure the scope is suitable for Kaizen. You're not picking something which is going to take 3 months to solve. The idea is to get something done quick and implement it and move on to the next problem. Okay, I'll stop here. If there's any questions, feel free to ask.
One question.
Yep.
Normally, how long does take the preparation?
Yeah, that's very good. Depends on your scope, Rova, but typically it will take 2 to 3 weeks to go through each of the steps that I talked about from the time somebody identifies the problem. I usually plan for a month if I can to make sure that all the logistic parts I talked about in the end are also, there's enough time to book them. But collection of data itself is the longest piece, right? So you're going to have to figure out how many areas and processes you need to go see. So if you got multiple processes that you have to see, then you at least need a shift or 2 shifts of data, full shifts of data to observe and make sure that you got the right lens into the how things run. So you can connect it with the historical data and with the process expert. So that's depending on how much data you're collecting. It could be 2 to 3 weeks, could be a month.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay. I'm a couple of minutes over. Go ahead and drop off if you need. I'm just going to elaborate a little bit more on Rova's question there. It does take 2 to 3 months on prep side, but the overall improvement should not take more than 3 months for Kaizen, right? That's the kind of thumb rule. The idea is that you're picking something which can be quickly solved and implemented and be in place within 3 months. So if you pick something which is going to take longer than that, usually it's because you picked the wrong problem for Kaizen. So that's all we'll add. We're going to cover that in our next webinar, but I just wanted to tie it to your question today.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.